Marcus Wellington III sat in his father's mahogany-paneled study, his hands trembling as he held the document that would change his life forever. Outside, snow fell softly on the sprawling estate, but inside, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. His father, Richard Wellington, stood by the fireplace, his imposing figure casting a long shadow across the Persian rug. "You can't be serious, father," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "An ultimatum?" On Christmas Eve, Richard's steel-grey eyes remained fixed on his son. "I've never been more serious, Marcus. You have until midnight tonight to make your decision. Either you marry Sarah Chen, the head chef at the Wellington Hotel, or you lose everything. Your trust fund, your position at the company, even your claim to this estate." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Sarah Chen, the brilliant but humble chef who had transformed their hotel's restaurant into a Michelin-starred sensation. He'd only spoken to her a handful of times during his rare visits to the hotel's kitchen, usually when his father insisted on introducing him to the staff. "This is insane! You can't force me to marry someone I barely know." Marcus stood up, his expensive suit creasing with the sudden movement. Richard's expression remained unchanged. "I've watched you waste your life, Marcus. 32 years old, and what do you have to show for it? A string of failed relationships with socialites who care more about their Instagram followers than building a real life. Meanwhile, Sarah has worked her way up from nothing, turned our struggling restaurant into a gold mine, and shows more business acumen than you've demonstrated in your entire career. So this is about business," Marcus scoffed, running his hands through his perfectly styled hair. "Making sure the Wellington Empire stays profitable? No, son. This is about saving you from yourself." Richard moved away from the fireplace, picking up a framed photo from his desk. Marcus, as a child, bright-eyed and full of promise. "Sarah reminds me of your mother. Determined, genuine, unafraid of hard work. Before she passed, your mother made me promise to ensure you'd find happiness. Real happiness, not this hollow existence you're living now." Marcus felt his chest tighten at the mention of his mother. "And you think forcing me into an arranged marriage will make me happy? I think giving you a choice will make you wake up." Richard set down the photograph. "You have until midnight. Either propose to Sarah Chen, and I mean a real proposal, one that gives her a genuine choice to accept or refuse, or start planning your new life without the Wellington name behind you." "And what about Sarah? Does she know about this ridiculous plan?" "No, and you're not to tell her about our arrangement. If you choose to propose, it must come from a place of sincerity. She deserves that much respect." Marcus stared at his father in disbelief. The great Richard Wellington, titan of the hospitality industry, had finally lost his mind. The worst part was, Marcus knew his father never bluffed. When Richard Wellington made a threat, it was a promise. Looking down at the document, a contract that would transfer all his inheritance and current assets to various charities if he failed to meet the terms, Marcus felt trapped. The Christmas Eve deadline seemed especially cruel, but then again, his father had always had a flair for dramatic timing. "You have exactly 12 hours, Richard said, checking his Patek Philippe watch. "I suggest you spend them wisely. Get to know Sarah, really know her. You might be surprised by what you discover." Marcus stood up, straightening his tie with shaking hands. "And if she refuses, then at least you'll have tried. That's all I'm asking. That you make a genuine effort to step outside your comfortable bubble and connect with someone real." As Marcus turned to leave the study, his father's voice stopped him one last time. "Oh, and Marcus, she's working the Christmas Eve dinner service tonight. I'd start there if I were you." The heavy door closed behind Marcus with a decisive click, leaving him alone in the hallway with his thoughts and the ticking clock of his father's ultimatum. Through the window, he could see the snow falling harder now, blanketing the world in white, a world that suddenly seemed much more complicated than it had been just an hour ago. The Wellington Hotel was only a 20-minute drive away, and Sarah Chen would be preparing for the evening's exclusive Christmas Eve dinner service. Marcus checked his watch. Noon. 12 hours to either change his life forever or lose everything he'd ever known. With a deep breath, he headed for the garage, his footsteps echoing through the mansion's marble halls. One way or another, this would be a Christmas Eve he'd never forget. Will Marcus choose love or money? Share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you do if faced with this impossible choice on Christmas Eve? Don't forget to subscribe to find out what happens next. The Wellington Hotel's kitchen was a symphony of controlled chaos as Marcus stepped through the service entrance. The air was thick with the aroma of roasting chestnuts, mulled wine, and something deeper, richer, a sauce that made his mouth water involuntarily. But it was Sarah Chen who commanded his attention. She stood at the center of it all, her black chef's coat pristine despite the frenetic activity around her. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun, revealing sharp cheekbones and focused eyes that missed nothing. "Table 4's lamb needs more time," she called out, her voice carrying authority without shouting. "James, watch that reduction. If it over-reduces again, I'll have you peeling potatoes until New Year's." Marcus watched as the kitchen staff moved around her like a well-orchestrated dance. There was something mesmerizing about her presence. She didn't demand respect through fear like his father, but through a quiet competence that inspired loyalty. "Mr. Wellington," Sarah said, spotting him. She didn't bow or scrape like others did when they saw him. Instead, she merely raised an eyebrow. "The kitchen's quite busy preparing for tonight's service. Is there something I can help you with?" Marcus suddenly felt foolish in his $3,000 suit. Here was a woman who had earned everything she had, while he had been born into privilege. I was hoping we could talk. About tonight's menu, perhaps?" Sarah's eyes narrowed slightly. In the 3 years she'd worked at the hotel, Marcus had never once shown interest in the kitchen's operation. "Of course," she said carefully, "though I should warn you, I'm not changing the menu. Your father already approved it weeks ago." No, that's not why I'm here," Marcus said quickly. "Actually, I was wondering if you might need an extra pair of hands. I thought maybe I could help learn about the kitchen operations." The entire kitchen seemed to freeze. Even the sous chef nearly dropped his pan. Sarah stared at him as if he'd suggested they serve McDonald's for Christmas dinner. "You want to help? In the kitchen?" Her tone suggested she was waiting for the punchline. Marcus loosened his tie, feeling the pressure of time ticking away. "I know it sounds strange, but yes, I realize I've been disconnected from this part of our business. I'd like to change that." Sarah studied him for a long moment, then nodded toward a door at the back. "My office. 2 minutes." She turned to her sous chef. "Anton, watch the line." Her office was barely bigger than a closet, with just enough room for a small desk covered in invoices and menu plans. A wall calendar showed ingredient seasonality, and a single photo frame held a picture of what appeared to be Sarah with an elderly couple. Her parents, Marcus guessed. "All right, Mr. Wellington," Sarah said, closing the door. "What's this really about?" Marcus hadn't prepared for such direct questioning. "I told you, I want to learn." "No," Sarah cut him off. "The truth. I've worked here 3 years, and in that time you visited the kitchen exactly 4 times, always with your father, always looking like you'd rather be anywhere else. Now suddenly on Christmas Eve, you want to play chef? Something's going on, and I don't have time for games." Her directness was both refreshing and terrifying. Marcus had grown up in a world of subtle implications and political maneuvering. Sarah's straightforward approach left him nowhere to hide. "You're right," he admitted, surprising himself with his honesty. I've realized some things about myself lately, about how I've taken everything for granted. I look at what you've built here, how you've transformed our restaurant, and I'm impressed. More than impressed, I'm inspired." Sarah's expression softened slightly, but her guard remained up. And this sudden inspiration couldn't wait until after the busiest service of the year. Marcus glanced at his watch. 10 hours until midnight. "No, it couldn't. Please, Sarah, let me help. even if it's just washing dishes or peeling potatoes. I want to understand your world." Sarah pushed a strand of hair behind her ear, revealing a small burn scar on her wrist, a badge of honor in her profession. Finally, she sighed. "Fine, but you follow my rules. No special treatment because of your name. You want to learn? You start at the bottom." She opened a cabinet and pulled out a spare white kitchen uniform. "Change into this. Your suit would give the health inspector a heart attack. When you're done, find Miguel by the dish pit. He'll show you the ropes." Marcus took the uniform, noting how different it felt from the fine fabrics he was used to. "Thank you, Sarah. I won't let you down." "We'll see," she said, but there was the ghost of a smile on her lips. "Oh, and Mr. Wellington, if you're serious about this, in my kitchen it's Chef or Chef Chen, not Sarah." As Marcus changed in the small employee bathroom, staring at his reflection in the spotted mirror, he realized he had never worked a real job in his life. Everything had been handed to him, his education, his position at the company, his lifestyle. But here, in Sarah's kitchen, none of that mattered. He emerged in the white uniform, feeling strangely vulnerable without his expensive armor. The kitchen staff tried to hide their smirks as he made his way to the dish pit, where Miguel, a sturdy man with kind eyes, waited to show him how to operate the industrial dishwasher. "First lesson," Miguel said with a grin, "in kitchen, everyone equal. Even son of big boss have to prove himself." Marcus rolled up his sleeves, noting how the hot water would soon turn his manicured hands red and raw. 8 hours until midnight. Hours. And he was starting to realize that getting to know Sarah Chen, Chef Chen, would be the easiest part of his challenge. The hard part would be proving himself worthy of her. Marcus just stepped into Sarah's world, and nothing will ever be the same. Hit like if you believe money can't buy real love. Subscribe now to see if Marcus can prove himself worthy in Sarah's kitchen. Marcus's hands were burning. 3 hours into his kitchen experience, he had washed more dishes than he'd seen in his entire life. His back ached, his feet throbbed, and he'd already ruined his first uniform with a splash of marinara sauce. But strangely, he didn't want to quit. "Wellington!" Chef Chen's voice cut through the kitchen chaos. "I need you on prep." He looked up from the dish pit, surprised. Miguel gave him an encouraging nod. "Go, you earn promotion." At the prep station, Sarah, Chef Chen, he corrected himself mentally, was julienning carrots with impressive speed. "Watch!" she commanded, her knife moving in a blur. "These need to be uniform. Consistency is everything in a professional kitchen. Each guest should have the same experience, whether they're first to be served or last." Marcus picked up a knife, attempting to mimic her technique. His first cuts were clumsy, uneven. "You're gripping the knife too hard," she said, stepping closer. "Here." Without warning, she placed her hand over his, adjusting his grip. "Like this. Let the knife do the work." The warmth of her hand lingered even after she stepped away. Marcus tried again, this time achieving slightly more consistent results. "Better," she said, and that single word of praise affected him more than any of his father's rare compliments ever had. "Now do 3 pounds. We need them for the winter vegetable medley." As he worked, Marcus observed Sarah moving through her kitchen. She wasn't just a chef, she was a leader. She knew every station, every recipe, every member of her staff. She praised good work specifically and corrected mistakes without humiliation. It was so different from his father's autocratic style. "Chef," he called out as she passed by again, "why carrots? I mean, for Christmas Eve dinner. Isn't it a bit simple?" Sarah paused, studying him. "Come with me," she said, leading him to the walk-in refrigerator. Inside, away from the kitchen's heat and noise, she pulled out a carrot and broke it in half. "Smell this," she instructed. Marcus complied, surprised by the sweetness. "It's different from regular carrots. These are special carrots. They're grown by an elderly couple who've been farming the same land for 40 years. They can only grow them in small batches, but the flavor is incredible. I could source cheaper carrots, mass-produced ones, but..." She touched the vegetable almost reverently. This is part of someone's life work, their passion, their story. When you serve food, you're not just feeding people, you're sharing stories. She looked at him intently. That's what you don't understand yet, Marcus. Everything in this kitchen, every ingredient, every recipe has a story. Even these simple carrots, nothing here is just about profit margins or impressing people. It's about respect for the food, for the people who grow it, and for the guests who trust us to feed them. Marcus felt something shift inside him. He'd always seen the hotel's restaurant as just another business asset, but Sarah saw it as something alive, something meaningful. "Tell me more," he said softly. "Please, I want to understand." Over the next hour, as they prepped vegetables together, Sarah shared stories about her ingredients and the people behind them. The mushrooms came from a forager who'd learned the trade from his grandfather. The herbs were grown by a woman who'd started her business after losing her husband, turning her grief into something beautiful. "And you?" Marcus asked, carefully slicing mushrooms. "What's your story, chef?" Sarah's knife paused briefly. "My parents ran a small noodle shop in Chinatown. Nothing fancy, but every day people would line up around the block. I learned everything about food from them, not just cooking, but loving what you do." Her voice softened. "They lost the shop during the financial crisis, had to sell everything. That's why I worked so hard to get here, to make them proud." Marcus thought about his own privilege, about how he'd never had to fight for anything. Are they coming tonight? For Christmas dinner?" Sarah shook her head. "They passed away 2 years ago. Car accident." She resumed chopping, her movements precise despite the emotion in her voice. "But I still cook, like they're watching. Everything I do in this kitchen, I do to honor them." The weight of his father's ultimatum suddenly felt different. This wasn't just about saving his inheritance anymore. Sarah wasn't just some pawn in his father's game. She was a real person with real pain, real dreams, real passion. "Chef!" a line cook called out, breaking the moment. "The first guests are arriving." Sarah straightened, her professional demeanor sliding back into place. "Everyone on their stations? Christmas Eve service begins now." She turned to Marcus. "Ready for the real test, Wellington?" He nodded, realizing he had just under 5 hours until midnight. But for the first time since his father's ultimatum, the deadline wasn't his primary concern. He genuinely wanted to prove himself worthy of being in this kitchen, of being part of this world that Sarah had created. "One more thing," Sarah said, fixing him with an intense gaze. "Whatever reason brought you here today, make sure it's honest. This kitchen runs on trust. Break that, and no amount of money or family name will fix it." Her words hit him like a physical blow. The ultimatum's weight pressed down on him as he watched her walk away, calling out orders and transforming into the commander of her domain. He was falling for her, truly falling for her, but the lie at the heart of his presence threatened to destroy any chance of something real between them. As the first tickets started coming in and the kitchen burst into controlled chaos, Marcus made a decision. Before the night was over, he would tell her everything about the ultimatum, about his father's manipulation, about his own growing feelings. He just hoped that when he did, she would understand that while lies had brought him into her kitchen, truth had made him want to stay. Sarah's story about her parents touched everyone's hearts. Share in the comments a special memory about someone who taught you the value of hard work and passion. Subscribe to see if Marcus will tell Sarah the truth. The Christmas Eve dinner service was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. The kitchen moved like a living organism, each person playing their crucial role in a complex dance of timing and precision. Steam billowed from pots, flames leapt from sauté pans, and through it all, Sarah's voice guided everyone like a conductor leading an orchestra. "Table 12, 2 duck, 1 salmon. Times on tables 8 through 10? Her commands were clear and confident, met with immediate responses of "Yes, chef," and precise time estimates. Marcus had been relegated to plating duty, carefully positioning those julienne carrots and other garnishes according to Sarah's exact specifications. His hands shook slightly with each plate, knowing that one mistake could disrupt the entire flow of service. "Wellington," Sarah called out, "those plates need to move faster. Perfection means nothing if the food gets cold." He picked up his pace, trying to maintain the standard she demanded, while keeping up with the kitchen's rhythm. Sweat dripped down his back, and his feet felt like they were on fire, but he refused to complain. Around him, the other staff members had been working just as hard, some for double shifts, and none of them showed any sign of slowing down. Through the service window, he caught glimpses of the dining room, families dressed in their holiday best, couples enjoying romantic dinners, all of them unaware of the intense drama unfolding in the kitchen, or the personal drama building in his own heart. Sarah appeared beside him, adjusting one of his garnishes with quick, precise movements. "Better," she said, "but watch your spacing. Every element needs room to breathe." Her presence so close to him made his heart race. And not just from the kitchen's heat. 3 hours into service, a complication arose that would test them all. A group of prestigious food critics had arrived unannounced, a common occurrence on major holidays when they hoped to catch restaurants at their most challenged. "Critics at table 15, Sarah announced, her voice steady but with an edge that made everyone stand straighter. "They've ordered one of everything. This is what we've trained for. Every plate perfect, every temperature exact. Show them why the Wellington is worth their time." Marcus watched as she personally inspected every dish destined for table 15. Her attention to detail was remarkable, adjusting the position of a single herb, wiping away the smallest drop of sauce that threatened the plate's perfection. "Chef," Marcus said during a brief lull, "why do you care so much about their opinion? The restaurant is already successful." Sarah looked at him, her eyes intense. "It's not about their opinion, Marcus. It's about pride in what we do. Every guest deserves our best, whether they're a critic or a family celebrating their child's first Christmas dinner out. That's something your father understood when he hired me." The mention of his father made Marcus's stomach clench. He checked his watch. Less than 2 hours until midnight. The truth he needed to tell her felt like it was burning a hole in his chest. "Sarah," he started, "I need to tell you something." "Behind!" a line cook called out, rushing past with a hot pan. The moment was broken as they were thrust back into the whirlwind of service. An hour later, disaster struck. One of the newer line cooks dropped an entire tray of prepared duck breasts, a key component of their signature Christmas dish. The silence that followed was deafening. "How many orders left?" Sarah asked calmly. 8, chef, including 2 for the critics' table." Marcus watched as Sarah closed her eyes for a brief moment, calculating. The duck took time to prepare properly, time they didn't have. He could see the entire evening service threatening to unravel. "I have an idea," he said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him, surprised. "The Wellington downtown has the same dish on their menu. I could call them, have them prepare the duck and send it over. I can be there and back in 30 minutes. Sarah considered this for a moment. "No," she said finally. "That's not how we do things here. We solve our own problems." She turned to her team. "Clear the pass. I need space." What followed was a masterclass in crisis management. Sarah personally took over the protein station, reorganizing the entire service flow while she prepared new duck breasts. Her hands moved with incredible speed and precision, yet never sacrificed quality. "Wellington," she called out, "I need you on sauce. Remember what I showed you earlier?" Marcus nodded. Moving to the saucier station. The responsibility was enormous. The sauce was a crucial component of the dish, and one mistake could ruin everything. But as he worked, following Sarah's earlier instructions, he found a rhythm. The sweet and savory aroma rising from his pan told him he was on the right track. "Good consistency," Sarah said, appearing beside him to check his work. "You're learning." Their eyes met for a moment, and Marcus saw something there. Respect. Perhaps even admiration. It made the guilt of his secret even harder to bear. The crisis was averted through sheer skill and teamwork. When the critics' plates went out, they were perfect, perhaps even better than they would have been before the accident, as Sarah had taken personal charge of their preparation. As the service began to wind down, with only a few tables remaining, Marcus knew it was time. He couldn't wait any longer. "Chef," he said, approaching Sarah as she finished inspecting the last plates. "Can we talk? Privately?" She must have seen something in his expression, because she nodded, leading him back to her small office. The space felt even smaller now, charged with the energy of everything unsaid between them. "Sarah," he began, his heart pounding, "I haven't been entirely honest about why I came here today." She leaned against her desk, crossing her arms. "I know." This caught him off guard. "You know?" "Marcus, I've worked in kitchens since I was 15. I can spot someone with an agenda from a mile away. The only question is, what's yours?" He took a deep breath, knowing these next words could destroy everything. "My father gave me an ultimatum this morning. He told me I had until midnight tonight to—" He couldn't meet her eyes. "To propose to you, or I lose everything, my inheritance, my position, all of it." The silence that followed was devastating. When he finally looked up, Sarah's expression was unreadable. "Get out," she said quietly. "Sarah, please let me explain." "That's chef to you," she cut him off, her voice sharp as a knife. "So this was all a game? Learning the kitchen, asking about my life, my parents? Just a strategy to secure your fortune?" "No, I mean, yes, at first, but I trusted you," she said, and the hurt in her voice was worse than anger. "I let you into my kitchen, my world. I thought you were finally showing interest in something beyond your privileged bubble. But this whole time, I was just a means to an end." "It's not like that anymore," Marcus pleaded. "Yes, I came here because of my father's ultimatum, but everything that happened today, everything I learned, everything I felt, that was real." Sarah laughed bitterly. "Real? You wouldn't even be here if your father hadn't forced you. Do you have any idea what that feels like? To know that the only reason someone might want to marry you is because they're being threatened with disinheritance." Marcus felt his world crumbling. "Sarah, I'm falling in love with you." "No," she said firmly. "You're falling in love with the idea of saving your lifestyle. I won't be part of this manipulation, not yours and not your father's." A knock at the office door interrupted them. Anton, the sous chef, poked his head in. "Chef, the critics are asking to speak with you. They say it's important." Sarah straightened, her professional mask sliding back into place. "We're done here, Mr. Wellington. Please leave my kitchen." "Sarah, now." Marcus watched her walk away, her back straight, her head high. He had just over 30 minutes until his father's deadline, but it didn't matter anymore. He had lost something far more valuable than his inheritance. He had lost the trust of the first person who had made him want to be better. As he changed out of his kitchen whites and back into his suit, he could hear the distant sound of applause from the dining room. The critics must have loved the food. Sarah had turned a potential disaster into a triumph, while he had turned a chance at real happiness into yet another privileged man's mistake. He left through the service entrance, stepping into the cold December night. Snow was falling again, but he barely felt it. His phone showed several missed calls from his father, but he ignored them. Instead, he sat on a crate by the kitchen door, listening to the sounds of the final service winding down, knowing he had ruined perhaps his only chance at something genuine in his life. The truth is out, and Sarah's heart is broken. Do you think she should give Marcus another chance? Comment yes or no below, and subscribe to discover if love can overcome betrayal. The snow fell heavier as midnight approached. Marcus sat motionless outside the kitchen door, his expensive suit collecting snowflakes, his world collapsing around him. Inside, he could hear the final sounds of service winding down, the clatter of dishes, the calls for final cleanup, the tired but satisfied voices of the kitchen staff. His phone buzzed again. His father. This time he answered, It's almost midnight. Richard Wellington's voice was sharp. Where are you? Did you propose? Marcus watched his breath form clouds in the cold air. No, father. I didn't propose. And I won't. Then you understand what that means. Everything goes. The trust fund. Your position, Take it. Marcus interrupted, his voice steady. Take it all. Because today I learned something worth more than everything you could ever give me or take away. There was a long pause on the other end. And what's that? That I've been measuring my life with the wrong metrics. Success isn't about what you have. It's about who you become. Sarah taught me that in just one day. The kitchen door opened behind him, spilling warm light onto the snow. Marcus turned, expecting to see a staff member leaving for the night. Instead, he found Sarah standing there, still in her chef's whites, looking at him with an unreadable expression. I have to go, father, Marcus said, ending the call despite Richard's protests. Sarah stepped out into the snow, closing the door behind her. You're still here. I couldn't leave, Marcus admitted. Not like this, not without saying something else. I heard what you said to your father just now, she said quietly. Marcus stood, brushing snow from his suit. I meant every word. Sarah, I came here today for all the wrong reasons, but I'm leaving as a different person. You showed me a world where passion means more than profit, where hard work matters more than heredity, where every small detail is an act of love. He took a step closer, but maintained a respectful distance. I'm not asking you to marry me. You deserve better than a proposal born from an ultimatum. But I am asking for a chance, not to be your husband, but to be your student. To learn more about the world you created here, about the way you see life, about what it means to earn something rather than just receive it. Sarah studied him for a long moment. The critics loved the food, she said finally. They said the sauce was exceptional. That was your sauce. I had a good teacher. You know, she continued, when I first started here, your father told me something interesting. He said that sometimes people need to lose everything to find what they're really worth. A small smile played at her lips. I thought he was talking about me, about my parents losing their restaurant. Now I wonder if he had someone else in mind. Marcus's eyes widened as understanding dawned. You mean he planned this? All of it? The Richard Wellington I know doesn't give ultimatums. He creates opportunities. Maybe he saw something in both of us that we needed to discover for ourselves. The clock on the hotel's facade began to chime midnight. With each bell toll, snowflakes danced in the air between them. It's midnight, Marcus said softly. I'm officially disinherited. Sarah took a step closer. And how does that feel? Strangely liberating. He smiled. For the first time in my life, whatever happens next will be because of who I am, not what I own. And who are you, Marcus Wellington? I'm not sure yet, but I'd like to find out. He gestured to the kitchen door. Maybe starting as a dishwasher? Sarah laughed, a real warm laugh that seemed to melt the snow around them. I think we can do better than that. You showed real promise with that sauce tonight. She paused, considering. The morning shift starts at 5 a.m. Don't be late. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a beginning. She reached out and straightened his snow-dusted tie. What happens after that is up to you. Marcus caught her hand gently. And what about us? That's also a beginning we'll have to earn. She squeezed his hand once before letting go. One step at a time, one day at a time, one plate at a time. As they stood there in the falling snow, the last chime of midnight fading into the night, Marcus understood that he had received something far more valuable than any inheritance. He had been given the chance to become someone worthy of love, respect, and his own pride. His father's ultimatum hadn't been about forcing a marriage or teaching him a lesson about money. It had been about giving him the push he needed to step out of his gilded cage and discover his own worth. Sarah turned back toward the kitchen door. 5 a.m., Wellington. Don't make me regret this. I won't, Chef. I promise. As she disappeared back into her domain, Marcus looked up at the snow falling from the Christmas sky. Tomorrow would bring his first real day of work. his first step on a path he'd chosen for himself. He had lost a fortune, but found a purpose. Lost a deadline, but gained a future. His phone buzzed one final time, a text from his father. "Proud of you, son. Merry Christmas. P.S. Your mother's sauce recipe was always her best dish, too." Marcus smiled, understanding at last. Some gifts couldn't be inherited. They had to be earned. Some loves couldn't be forced. They had to grow. And sometimes, the greatest Christmas miracle wasn't finding what you thought you wanted, but discovering what you truly needed. He brushed the snow from his shoulders and headed home to prepare for his 5 a.m. shift, knowing that tomorrow would be the first day of his real life, one earned through hard work, guided by passion and seasoned with the possibility of true love. Wow, what an incredible journey we've shared together. I have 2 questions for you. What would you have done in Marcus's shoes? Stayed in your comfort zone of wealth and privilege, or risked it all for a chance at real love and personal growth? When was the last time someone believed in you enough to push you completely out of your comfort zone, like Richard did with his son? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your personal experiences and reflections. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like and subscribe. Your support keeps this channel going, allowing us to bring you powerful emotional stories every single day that remind us what truly matters in life. And if you're ready for another journey that will warm your heart and maybe even change how you see the world, check out our next story appearing on the left side of your screen. Trust me, you won't want to miss this one. It's packed with just as many emotional twists and life-changing moments as what you've just witnessed. Remember, together, we're building a community that believes in the power of love, second chances, and personal transformation. See you in our next story.